I'm Shawn.
And I'm Mike, and you're listening to
Shawn and Mike Take a Hike.
Welcome to another episode of Shawn and Mike Take a Hike. What are we going to talk about today, Shawn?
Today, I thought we could talk about how to get unlost.
Okay, so
like,
if you find yourself lost.
If you find yourself lost, or you find yourself, like, off the trail somehow and don't know where you're at. Like, look, bottom line, I hope this never happens to anybody, and I hope that this is never, like, a thing people have to worry about.
Right.
But I feel like we should at least maybe touch on it, because nobody plans on getting lost, right?
You know? Well, at least I hope they don't.
Right. I mean, we're all out to get lost in nature and all that sort of stuff, quote unquote, like in the abstract sense, like get lost in nature. But
right,
there is a chance that you could wind up off the trail and get turned around and not know what to do. So I thought we could share some tricks and tips. Tips and tricks. There it is. Tips and tricks of, like, what to do in that situation in case it does happen to somebody.
Yeah. Hopefully, if it does happen and it's still daylight and you just, maybe you found a different trail, you haven't seen a blue blaze or whatever in a while, turn around and go find the other trail and see if you just took a missed turn. If you find out that you're in the middle of nowhere and you just completely lost the trail, then there's going to be some ideas and options for you there too.
Well, and we talked on a different episode. I don't even remember which one it was at this point, because we say so much stuff, it's hard to keep track of which episode it was on. But, like, we were talking about on our first trip when we were up in the Porkies. Now, full disclosure, the Porkies was pretty well marked.
Yeah.
But you and I... Well,
we just didn't really know.
We didn't know. We weren't sure what to look for. We weren't real accustomed to how hiking worked. And we got to a couple of spots, I remember, where it was like we would stop and be like, okay, I haven't seen a marking in a while. Are we still on the trail? Or we'd come to what looked like maybe a fork. Like, I would say it was a fork, even though, like, one was not actually the path and one was actually the path. And I remember we would come to those, and you and I would both be like, well, I'm going to take, like, 20 steps down this way. You take 20 steps down this way. See if you see a marking, and then, like, yell to each other. Like, we wouldn't get so far apart that we couldn't see each other.
Right.
But, like, that sort of stuff could happen. Like, even your best intentions, if you get to a trail that either you missed the markings or they weren't marked all that well, or whatever the situation is, you could find yourself off the path, and then it's like, then you're relying on being able to backtrack. Like, hopefully looking back on the path the other way, it still looks like a path that way.
Right.
Or you can see your footprints or whatever. But, I'm just saying, you might laugh thinking, like, oh, I'm never going to get lost, because how do you wind up losing the trail? But, like, I'm telling you, you can lose the trail. Like, it can be a thing.
There's been, even this year, there's been reports and things like that of people getting rescued out of the, I think, Yosemite or Zion or something. Like, people have been getting misplaced in places where a lot of people go. So it's not like the trails aren't, like, camped down and, like, it's a trail. So
well, and from my understanding, the one that pops into my head immediately, and I don't remember all the exact details, but it was a hiker. So it's not just like somebody was out there and got turned around. It's like somebody went out there to go hiking. Right. So, you know what I mean? Like, I would think any of us that are quote unquote hikers or backpackers, like, we kind of plan, we kind of know what we're doing, whatever. Yeah. And then you got, like, the general public who wanders off on a trail and gets lost. Like, that's both sad, both unfortunate. Hopefully it never happens. But, like, I think people that do backpacking or do hiking, you feel like, I know how to stay on the trail. It's, I know what markers look like, and I know what I'm doing. But like you said, several this year alone have wound up lost and needed assistance.
Yep. No, there's no greater wrong saying or wrongdoing other than saying that'll never happen to me or that could never happen to me, because it absolutely could.
Right. Don't be
So,
so arrogant that it's like, oh, I'm better than that. I'm never going to get lost.
right,
Like,
right,
you and I have been in the situation where it's like,
hmm
we might be lost right now. Turns out we weren't,
right.
luckily. But, you
Right.
know,
Well, there was the one, I don't remember if it was this year or last year, but we were in the Picture Rocks and we ended up, we're like, I think it goes and follows the lakeshore more. So we ended up like climbing over some like down trees and things
yeah,
like that, little water crossing. And then all of a sudden we're like, nah, I don't think this is it. So we turned back and then we found the
right.
right trail. So,
Right.
but
Or we
it
had the one
happens.
up in, I don't remember what the lake was that we hiked around, but it was up in the Huron National Forest, where that was the one that we have said like wasn't super well marked. Like the trail was like
Yep.
pretty defined, but there weren't a lot of markings on it. And I
Right.
remember a couple of times when we were on that trail where it's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm on the path still, but like I'm not entirely sure because it was fairly overgrown.
Right.
And you and I both made comments like, well, I can hear a road over in that direction. So like if we're not on the trail, at least if we walk that way, there's a road over there. Or you said you had seen a car drive by in the distance at
Yeah.
one point. So it's like, okay, even if we're off the trail, we're not super lost because like you can always at
Right.
least get to the road and then, figure it out from there. But I mean, I guess maybe I'm getting ahead of myself because that might be one of the tips. Like, I mean, if you find yourself off a trail, we'll get to that, I guess. But like, use your surroundings or like stop, assess where you're at. Like, can you
Yep.
hear anything, right? Like, can you hear a river? Can you hear a stream? Can you hear a road? Can you hear other hikers? Can you
Right.
hear boats out on a lake somewhere? Like stop, don't panic,
Yep.
use all of your senses, and then figure out what to do.
Yeah.
So I guess, I mean,
Like,
do we want to get into it maybe? So
yeah, I was gonna say, like, I'm looking at my notes here, and like one of the methods that I came across was the stop method.
the stop method is like a big thing that I'm going to
Yeah,
talk about too. So
yeah,
yeah, so maybe this is a good time to get into that. So like, do you
yeah,
want to go over the stop method like real quickly and then we can kind of get into it in detail?
yeah. So the stop method, it's an acronym. It stands for stop, think, observe, and plan. So each of those is one of their its own little steps or thoughts within this getting unlost process. If you find yourself not knowing where exactly you're at,
Yeah,
and you know where you're supposed to be, but you're not there.
right.
So, um,
Right. You know where you're
so
supposed to be, but that's not where you are. So
right. So, I mean, just like you said, the stop is you just stop as soon as you realize that you're kind of not where you're supposed to be, and then you just open your ears. You take a look around, see if you can find any trail markings or something that resembles a trail, anything like that. You kind of just you stop and observe.
I mean, and that's so I think it's funny that the S in stop stands for stop, but
Right.
it seriously like stop. Take a
Right.
minute,
Yep.
don't freak out, and
Right.
just
That's the
stop
big
and
thing is
collect
staying
yourself.
calm.
That's the thing. I mean, because I think it would get real easy to realize that you are lost or like
Hmm.
you said, maybe not where you're supposed to be. Like even if you're not lost, if
Right.
you're not where you think you were or you're not where you're supposed to be, I think it would be real easy to panic.
Oh
Like
yeah.
because when you're out, especially if you're hiking in the woods where visibility is, you know, only as good as depending on how thick the woods are, right?
Right.
I think it would be real easy to panic. So the
Well, and
big
and
thing,
depending on the time of the day too. Like if it's getting closer to dark and you're coming up to where you should be setting up camp, but you're not
yeah,
at camp yet.
100%.
So
Well, and we've all been guilty at one time or another in our lives of like, even if you're not on the trail, right? Like even if you're just doing whatever, well, I'll just keep going because it's got to be right up here around the corner, or it's got to
right.
be up just like over the next hill, or it's got to be whatever. So then like you just keep pushing yourself because we got to be almost there. So you just keep going because there ain't no point in stopping now, and yada yada. And then you just get more lost and more further away from where you're supposed to be. So not panicking and stop moving forward. Like literally stop. Like stop where you're at. Take
Right.
a beat assess your physical and mental well-being,
Yep.
and just breathe for a hot minute. Like, just
Yep.
pause.
Yep. Yeah, I mean that's really no better way to put it that I can think of is just stop and think and well stop and assess. I guess you can move on to the T, which is the think part.
Well, right. Okay,
And
so then the T is think, right?
right. So you again you calmly assess your situation and you uh try to avoid panic because
Yeah.
I mean panic can cloud your judgment. Panic can really make you do some things that you probably shouldn't.
Yep.
So, like, don't just take your pack off and start running. Like,
Right. Which,
like,
I'll be honest, I can see that being an urge that people would have is just like, okay, I'm just going to take everything off and I just got to get moving faster, right? Like, I
right,
mean,
right.
bad idea.
Well, because if you're lost, good luck finding your pack.
Right.
You know, like, you
Right.
don't know where you're at. Good luck getting back there. So,
Exactly. So, yeah, be calm, be
yep,
rational, think it through. You'll probably be okay,
yep,
but like take a minute and like take your emotion out of it and think like, what is the next step? What do you need to do? How do you get yourself not lost anymore?
right.
Make a plan.
Yep.
So
Oh, you're jumping ahead to the
I'm
P
not, I'm
with that
not, I'm
word.
not trying to. Sorry. So the next one is O. So we
Yeah.
did the S, which is stop. We did the T, which is think. We did the O. The O is for observe.
Yep. So that's look at your surroundings, check things out. Do you see any trees there, markings, or any blazes? If you know, do you notice like the sun's in this direction? So I should be headed north, or I am headed whatever, and you know what general direction you're supposed to be in, which way the trail goes. So then maybe you can meet back up with the trail. Kind of take your time and assess that to see if you can find did you miss a blaze, it's just it's 15 feet
Right.
to your right or whatever. So
Well, and I would also include in observe, like this is where you're going to be using all your senses, right? You're going to be listening. Do
yep,
you hear other hikers? Do you hear traffic? Do you hear a river? Do you hear, like, that's where you're going to, for observe, use all of your senses, not just your eyes.
right.
Use your, what else, what can you hear? What is around you from where you are standing right now? What can you see? What can you hear? Maybe even what can you smell? I mean,
Do you smell a campfire? Is there a campsite set up somewhere and you smell a
right.
fire? You know?
Do you hear some laughter? Do you hear somebody playing music? Do you hear somebody mowing the lawn? Like any of
Right.
those things, like that's a good indication. Okay, maybe that's not the direction that you ultimately want to be, but at least there's humans over there, so you can
Right.
seek assistance or whatever. But then another thing that I would recommend, like during the O for observe, is take stock of your supplies too. So like
Yeah.
this is a good time to check. Like, okay, what's your situation? Do you got some food rations? Do you got some water still? Because like if you got food and water and maybe shelter if it's starting to get dark, like all the more reason to stay calm because like you've got your essentials, right? You're
Right.
fine. Yeah, you're not where you're supposed to be. Yeah, you're off the trail. You got everything you need to survive. You got food and water. Like,
Yep.
okay, might you get a little bit hungry? Maybe you'll get a little bit hungry, but you don't need to panic immediately because you've got what you need right on your person to,
Well,
you know,
and like we mentioned in our can I set up camp here is you can set up camp if it's an emergency, if you need to disperse camp, you can set up camp there. The worst thing that's going to happen is if a ranger finds you, you're not lost anymore.
exactly. Could not have
So,
said that better myself. Like, oh no, somebody's coming out to get me in trouble, but hey,
right,
it's a somebody that hopefully knows where they're at.
right. So,
Yeah,
turns out like the worst thing is they find you, you're not lost, or you wake up in the morning, you've got a little bit more energy, it's daylight, you can go reassess your situation, see if you can find the trail, get to where you're supposed to be.
absolutely. Well, and I'll be honest, that's partly because we are getting older and I just can't go that far. But partly that's one of the reasons that I don't like to push our distance so much when we go every day. Like, I don't want to be
Right.
getting to camp. I don't want to be pushing our distance every day so far that we're like having to get to camp at dark or having to
Right.
get to where we're going to stop when it's like the sun going down, or pushing ourselves so far that and this is a little bit off topic, but like, so you can't take a break when you need to take a break, right? Like, I don't
Yep.
want to be pushing us that far that we don't leave ourselves a little bit of wiggle room. I don't specifically plan it for quote unquote getting lost or getting off the trail and needing to find our way back to the trail, but like, it's an added bonus to like, okay,
Absolutely. Yep.
if we wind up not getting to whatever milestone or whatever that we think we're going to get to, because you and I kind of plan like waypoints along our trip too, like, okay,
Yeah.
by the second hour we should roughly be to this river or whatever, so like we have those waypoints built in. If like hour 3 gets to us and we haven't gotten to a river yet, well, okay,
Right.
maybe we're not where we're supposed to be.
Right. We stop, we reassess, like we look at our planned map and we look at all of that kind of stuff to just say, okay, like the river should, oh, it's right up around this bend. We were just a
Right,
little off on our calculations or whatever.
right,
Like, but yeah, you always want to keep checking in with yourself. Don't just walk and be like, this should take me 4 hours, and then 4 hours later you're not where you're supposed to be, and turns
right,
out you're way on the wrong trail.
right,
Keep reassessing where you're at, where you're supposed to be, and
right. And then I guess we're kind of talking about planning, so let's get to the P in the STOP method, which P stands for planning. So, okay, so
yep.
you've stopped, you took a minute to compose yourself, you've thought about the situation you're in, you've taken all your observations, now you're going to develop a plan. So, based on all of your like sensory input and all of your logical thinking,
Yep.
now what's the next thing that you're going to do?
You're going to make a plan to get out of the woods or find the trail or um, get unlost. You're going to figure out what your plan of action is going to be and how you're methodically going to attack this.
In full disclosure, one thing that you can do as your plan, maybe the best course of action is not moving at all.
Yep.
So like Mike is saying, like you're going to make a plan to, walk towards this sound or walk towards this smell or walk towards where you can see cars driving down the road or walk to this hill that you can see or walk to whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's your plan. And if that is a viable option, do that.
Yep.
If you cannot come up with a viable option, though, it might be best not to do anything.
At least at first. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, like, it's going to come down to the point where you're either going to start running out of food or you're going to run out of water, something. You're going to have to do a little bit of searching around there. But if you have shelter, then one of the things in my research that I found out, or didn't find out, but I found was that one method is if it is a place where you're going to set up like a little base camp, and that is where you're going to start trying to get on Lost. Set that base camp, have something that you can use as a blaze, whether it's your knife and you just got to carve a little bit into a tree or something like that. Walk in one direction, mark every 10-15 feet that you're going in that direction for, I don't know, 50 paces, 100 paces, however far you want to go, and say, okay, well, I made it this far, I didn't find anything. Well, then you can trace your steps back to your
Sure.
base camp.
Yep.
Then I'm going to, like, that didn't work out, so let's go do the same amount of paces in a different direction. Go keep marking, or keep doing your blazes, or keep doing your markings. Go in that other new direction. If you find something, great. You know where you gotta go. You can go pack up camp and get going. Or it doesn't work. Come back to your base camp, reassess, pick a different direction, go that direction, and do the same thing. If all of the directions that you go doesn't lead you anywhere, maybe you just didn't go far enough. The next day, if you got the energy, extend each trail. It's going to take you less time because you don't have to do all of those markings for that first leg of that bend. direction. So just keep going until you find something.
Well, and I don't disagree. Like that is everything that you said, absolutely true. But I guess what I'm trying to say by saying maybe your best course of action is to do nothing. Like if you are really lost, right, and really don't have the capability of getting yourself unlost in any way,
Okay.
if it's to the point where rescue people are going to be searching for you, right? Like
Oh,
if you are
absolutely.
that lost, where it
Yeah.
is where you were supposed to be at work on Monday and you didn't show up for work, and so you're sure somebody's called the authorities at this point, right?
Right.
It might be best not to be moving around when
Yep.
people are searching for you, because you might be missing each other, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Like you might be moving into an area that's already been checked, and then they might be moving into an area that you used to be, and you've crossed
Yep.
paths now, and now like you're almost making it even worse. So
Yep.
I guess I just say do nothing as knowing that that is an option. Like we're talking about making
Yep.
a plan. The
Yep.
plan can be, if it is so bad that maybe the conditions are dangerous for you to be moving, maybe you
Yeah.
don't have enough food to sustain burning that much energy doing all of this trying to get yourself out. Maybe, there are things that could come into play where no plan might be a good plan. Well, and I don't
Yeah.
want to say no plan, like don't be wandering around aimlessly without a plan,
No
but
movement.
like no movement might be a
Yeah.
plan.
Right. And yeah, that's definitely. I didn't think we were to the point of giving up at this point. No.
Well, and I'm hoping, I mean, hopefully we're not, but I guess I just want it to be in people's heads that, like, as part of the P, as part of the plan, P for plan could be stay put.
Yeah.
Staying put is a
Absolutely.
plan.
Yep. So, I mean, that's pretty much the stop method.
Yeah,
Like,
so that's the stop method, right?
which I think really, even though the other methods or other options, things like that, aren't called the stop method, they all kind of go along the same thing. It's just don't panic,
Yeah,
check your surroundings, and try to reorient yourself to where you can either find where you're supposed to be or make that decision to just stay put.
right. So let's extend the line of thinking. Let's pretend we've stopped. We've done all those things, right? Like we've stopped,
Yep.
assessed our situation. We've decided we're not so lost that we need to stay put. We want to try to figure out how to get back to where we need to be, or at least back to civilization. You kind of touched on one of the things already about kind of like making your own marks
Yeah.
to, so you're not doubling back on yourself, or so you're, if you've already been to this, whatever you're at. The great tips. One of the things I actually thought about while I was doing this research that we don't take with us in our packs, but I'm like, I wonder if we should, is you can buy real cheap that like tree marking ribbon stuff.
Yeah. I
Like
actually have a bunch.
do you
I
put it
do.
in your pack?
I don't put it in my pack. I have it for our property that
Yeah.
we have. But yeah,
I got to thinking, I'm like, man, it doesn't weigh that much. It doesn't take up
no,
that much space.
no.
I almost wonder if that wouldn't be worth taking with us.
Yeah,
It
probably
would
would be.
so much easier than carving something into a tree or setting up like rocks and sticks to mark that you've already
Yeah.
been there. I almost wonder if
Yeah,
that
for
wouldn't be
sure.
a terrible thing to take with us.
I mean, it wouldn't be a terrible thing. I mean, the more and more we do this, we talk, offline about stuff. Like one of the things I love about doing this podcast is it makes us come up with new ideas too for the
Right.
trail. So
Right.
yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea to take. Like I said, I think I bought a roll of 3,000 feet of it. I mean, it takes up no space that roll, but like I could shorten it quite a bit, and just re-roll it down to something else.
But I just feel like Mike was saying, do something to mark the path that you're taking so that you can either find your way back to wherever, your stop point was, so you're not getting even more lost or walking even further than you need to, but like it's a way to leave a path behind in some fashion. You could use sticks, or you could use rocks, or you could, if it's dirt on the ground or whatever, you could probably draw with your toes and try to make arrows or whatever to indicate where you've been. Or maybe if it's muddy, maybe you can follow your footprints. I don't know. But like if none of those are an option, this cheap marking ribbon stuff might not be bad. And you
Not
can
a
see
bad
it from a
idea.
long way away.
Right. Well, that's why we have it for our property. We wanted to mark the property lines that weren't marked so well and wanted it to be brighter color. So we just got this bright orange ribbon and just tied it around some trees. Like, it's perfect. So yeah, maybe I'll start grabbing some of that.
Well, and then I get to like with us, you and I, and here's another thing that I hope most people take with them. We do take a compass too.
Hmm.
So, like, I feel pretty confident that by using a compass, you and I could walk in a pretty straight line.
Yeah.
Now, that is not going to help us get back to the exact spot that we were when we started out, but theoretically, we were already lost when we were at that spot too. So I
Right.
feel like if you could at least walk in a straight line so you know you're going in
Yeah.
one direction and not just going in circles, that's another way that hopefully you could help yourself get unlost is like make
Yeah.
sure you are going in a straight line. If you just keep going in a straight line, hopefully sooner or later you will come across a path or a
Yep.
road or a river or a lake or something.
Well, and realistically, I mean, we both have iPhones, but like, I mean, even an Android or any other smartphone out there is going to have some kind of a map app. So if you have any kind of signal that will allow that app to load, then use that. Obviously, that'd be
Oh,
your
for
first
sure.
method. That'd be
For
your
sure.
first choice. Look and see what kind of signal you have and if you can get your maps to load.
Or if you've got like a real like a Garmin type GPS
Or
device,
GPS, yeah.
I mean, realistically, if you've got one of them, hopefully you're not lost in the first place because you got a GPS on you. But
Right.
if you just find yourself off the trail, hopefully those can help you navigate back to wherever the trail actually is. And like Mike is saying, if you've got a cell phone and it's got enough signal, use that as your reference. Like, you know, where are you? Hopefully that'll show a little dot on a map on where you're at,
Right.
or at least pretty close.
Yeah, and if it doesn't have enough signal to load the map, it might have enough signal to make a phone call. And then if you're to that point where you're done, you want to be unlost and you want to go home, then you can maybe call for some assistance.
Well, and even if you're not at the point where you want to give up, if you've got enough signal to either send a text message or a phone call and you know you are off the path, make a call or a text message at that point to somebody and just be like, look, it's not an emergency. I'm pretty sure I'm
Right.
okay, but I am off the path. I'm working my way to get back on, or whatever your situation is. Let somebody know that at this point you're at present not sure where you're at.
Right. Yeah. At least they've got a heads up and they know that if they don't hear from you within the next 24 hours or whatever, then maybe they need to they think about sending somebody out.
For sure. One of the features that I think most smartphones have these days is usually for the area that you're going, you can download, I think they always call it offline maps. So you can
Yeah.
download maps for the area you're in that will theoretically work even
Yep.
if you don't have cell phone signal. Full disclosure, I have never had to use that, so I don't fully understand.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you've got a map, but does it still put a pin where you're at? Because that uses GPS, right?
Right. And that typically uses your cell phone signal. So, like you said, we've never used it. Maybe we should try just to come back to it on our next trip,
Yeah,
which
maybe.
probably April or May. But yeah, we should definitely look
We
into
should try
trying
that.
that.
But so hopefully you have a compass,
Yeah.
like, and
Right.
please at least have a basic understanding of how to use a compass before you go out into the woods. Even if you have no plan on ever actually using it, please at least understand how to read a
Right.
compass. And hopefully you have, if you don't have offline maps on your phone, or even if you do, I don't think it's a terrible idea to have a printed off map to take with you.
No,
Hopefully between the two things,
you should be able to find something.
you can
Yeah.
find something, right?
There are know abouts where, okay, there's this lake that's a pretty big lake that's supposed to be up on my right hand side somewhere. So if I walk kind of straight forward to the right, I should find that. Like, something like that.
Or this path follows, it's pretty consistently a mile from this country road. This country
Right.
road stays to the south of the path the entire time. So, okay, so now I'm off
Right.
the trail. If I just walk south for a mile, I should hit this road, right? I mean, like, those sorts of things good to know how to be able to do.
Yep, absolutely. Um, Another thing that we kind of discussed on another one is make yourself visible, like wear your bright
Mm,
clothing, things
yeah.
like that. So if people do end up having to look for you, you are able to be seen. Um, Create your visibility with make large SOS things with rocks or anything like that. If you're staying in you're staying put and your people are looking for you, type of a thing. And we always carry our emergency whistle.
Yep.
So if you are lost, it's not just for when you're hurt. If you're lost or anything, you blow that whistle, and
Yeah.
if somebody might signal back with theirs to let you know that, yep, you're within earshot of somebody, so you can head towards their whistle or they can
Right.
head towards yours. So,
And the whole concept for the whistle, for anybody that doesn't understand what the concept for the whistle is, like the whole concept of the whistle is you can blow into a whistle for a lot longer than you can yell.
yep,
And typically speaking, a whistle's noise is going to travel further than what your voice yelling would
yes,
travel. So,
correct.
yeah, you might think to yourself, well, I can just yell for help. Eventually, your voice is going to give out, and your voice doesn't carry as far as the whistle noise carries. So, take a freaking whistle. They're cheap. Take
Right.
one,
They
please.
they weigh nothing, and like you said, they're cheap. A couple bucks can go a long ways.
Yeah. And
So,
then another thing that we've talked about is like we keep saying, hopefully you'll find a river or hopefully you'll find a body of
right.
water or whatever. So for anybody that doesn't know, like just basic, I don't want to call it survival skills because hopefully you're not like trying to survive. I mean, you are trying to survive at this point, but hopefully it's not that. But anyway, if you get to a river or lake, or river specifically, usually you can follow a river the way the water is flowing. So follow
Yep.
a river the way the water is flowing. Eventually, most flowing rivers eventually lead to civilization. So it's
Yep.
at least a good thing. It's like a thing that should be pretty easy to follow, and eventually it should get you to people.
Whether
So
it's civilization is just a bridge, like a
right,
road crossing or anything
right,
like that, you'll be able to find something, and then you can follow that road, or you might see cars,
right.
things like that, flag somebody down.
Well,
A lake,
and
a lake.
the
If you follow it around the lake, eventually you're probably going to find a boat launch. You're going to find a little community of houses that have lakefront property, something
right,
along those lines. So,
right. Yeah. So or a lot of lakes are even if you're in like the remote middle of nowhere, and if you happen to find a lake that doesn't have any houses or boat launches or anything like that, a majority of lakes, certainly not all of them, but a majority of them are river or stream fed. So then maybe you'll
right,
find an outlet where, okay, there was nothing at this lake. Let me
start
follow this
following the
river
stream or
to
whatever.
either the
Yep.
next lake or the civilization or whatever. So, yeah, so if you find yourself at a lake, walk around the lake for sure. And the other double added bonus of following about a body of water is at least you have water now.
Right. Yeah, you have a constant source of water. You might run out of food, but you can go a lot longer without food than you can without water.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether you
So,
got to boil it to sanitize it, or you have to, uh, you got some kind of a filtration system.
well,
You've got water.
or absolute worst case scenario, if it's been a significantly long time, which hopefully nobody's getting to that point, but like if it gets to the point where like you don't got a way to boil it anymore, I mean it's at least water. Like
Right.
is it maybe gonna make you sick? I don't know, maybe, but like it's better than dehydration, you know?
Right. Hopefully, you're not going to be lost long enough to where you get really, really sick off of
Yeah,
it. But
right, exactly. So that's kind of the thought with like the waterways. Now, the other thing that you can do to navigate, like if your compass is failing you and you can't find a waterway, the other thing that you can try to do, which is much harder in my personal opinion, use like nature as your navigation. So the sun
yep.
rises in the east, sets in the west, kind of, sorta. I mean, it does, and that's the rule. But like, like it doesn't rise in due east,
Due east. Yeah,
and it
exactly.
doesn't set in due west.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a little bit problematic, but at least you
But
can kind of get a decent bearing based on
right,
that. The other thing that you'll hear people say a lot is like moss grows on the north side of the tree.
I've read that's not true.
It's not true. That's the problem with that. Like, it's moss grows on the shady side of the tree. The shady
Right,
side of the tree in the northern hemisphere is usually the north side of the tree.
right.
So I think it is a good rule of thumb to say that moss grows on the north side of the tree. I wouldn't look at one tree and take that one tree's moss growth as word for it. You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
I would take a
and
consensus of
moss
multiple
usually,
trees.
yeah. Take a look at multiple trees, but moss typically needs a wet or moist environment. Also, it's not just the north side of the tree; it's going to go where the moisture is at too. So, if that happens to be on the south side of the tree, just because another tree is providing shade or anything like that, and that's where it's more wet, then that's where the moss is going to grow. So pay attention to other surroundings, things of that nature, and uh, you
The
can
other
figure
thing,
it out.
the other thing that kept coming up, and tell me if this kept coming up in your research, Mike. The other thing that I kept reading that's like you can use the stars to navigate.
Yeah,
I
I'm like,
think that is
I'm already lost. I'm
problematic.
not getting more lost in the dark.
That is okay. Thank you. I kept reading that and I'm like, that is such a problematic like suggestion because
Right,
I don't want people moving in the dark.
right.
If you don't know where you're at, I don't think moving in the dark is the right way to get unlost.
Nope. Well, I mean, good luck finding your stuff if you set it down or anything like that. Or finding where you originally were lost at. Like I don't know. I don't think venturing too far in the dark is a wise idea. That's me. If that could be.
Yeah, I don't think navigating by the stars is the best idea. I guess that's all I'm saying. Like it might help you orientate yourself at night. I don't think it's
Right.
the best.
Yeah. Don't get yourself more lost. Um, if you can help, if you can avoid it. If it's an emergency situation, then yeah,
So yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I'm not walking around in the dark. Bottom line,
no,
I don't.
no.
I don't think
The
that
only
there's
thing I
anything.
like to go walking around in the dark for is if I have to go to the bathroom.
Now, well, right, right, and hopefully you're not walking too far at that point, but
Right.
or hopefully you have a headlamp or whatever. I mean, that's all stuff that we talked about back in our gear episode too. Like, hopefully you've got stuff to be able to see at night. But I wouldn't be purposefully wandering around, especially if you don't know where you're at in the dark.
Right.
Now, another tip, like as far as like, let's pretend you don't have a compass and you are having a hard time walking in a straight line. Hopefully, you've got something to like mark your path so you can like look back and see, have you been going in a straight line? But another tip that I was reading about how to walk in a straight line is pick something like far away, like as far as you can
Yeah.
see, pick a specific thing. So is there a giant tree or is there a rock or is there a hill? And you can make sure you are walking directly to that thing because turns out people have just like naturally, like if you were blindfolded, you can think you are walking straight, but you actually walk in circles.
Yep.
I don't know why that
You.
is, but you're like,
Yeah.
but what you think is straight is actually a circle.
Yep. Yeah. I've never understood that either, but yeah, you will not walk in a straight line if you are looking at the ground. If you are looking like you said, just pick something. It's kind of like your driving technique. You're supposed to look way out in the distance, and that'll help you keep in your lane better, type of whatever. So this isn't a driving podcast.
Well, and
Um,
unfortunately, like let's face it, the ground is typically not flat that you're on either.
well, right. You do have to glance down.
And it's going to be hard to walk. Chances are you're not going to be able to walk in an exact straight line anyway, because you're going to be like navigating hills and brush and trees and rocks and all, maybe, caverns and I don't know. I mean, all sorts of things. So you're not really going to be able to just like walk in a straight line. Even if you are following a compass, it's not going to be a perfectly straight line that you're walking in just because of the way nature is.
Right.
So
Right.
pick a distant spot, walk towards that distant spot. And then when you get there, pick a new distant spot to walk to.
Right. And try to keep that as in as straight of a line as the previous spot and the starting point, things like that. Just
Right.
try to keep that going.
Or here's another thing, like hopefully, I mean, I guess maybe this isn't a great thing, but like, what if is there a radio tower or something that you can see? Or,
Yeah.
like, is there something man-made that you can make your way towards? Like, even if it's something that wouldn't necessarily have people at it, if there's a man-made something, it probably has a road to it.
Well, I was just going to say there's some kind of a service or access drive or something like that that goes to that, which comes off of a road. So, yeah, try to find that, and then you can find your way back to civilization that way.
And, like, all the while, I guess the other thing to kind of keep in the back of your mind is, like, if you didn't have cell signal where you started, if you have a phone on with you, which I hope you do, or an emergency beacon or something like that, like, if you're getting to the point where you need to activate your emergency beacon or alert somebody, pay attention as you're going. Like, did you get to a spot where there was signal? Maybe you didn't have one when you started, but do you have signal now that you can, send a message to somebody? And this kind of goes back to, like, the thing that Mike and I always kind of preach is let somebody know where you're going to be.
Yes. Yes. When you're planning your trip, that's part of our planning your trip episode, is once you have your plan, let others know your plan and let them know you'll try to check in periodically. But if you don't, at least that's where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, I really hope everybody has somebody that they can let know, and hopefully you're not hiking by yourself too. Like, that's another thing. Like, I get it. Some people want to go and do this by themselves, and I'm never gonna say 100% don't do that, but hopefully you are not by yourself. So I don't know, is it better to get lost in a group? Hopefully it's better to get lost in a group. Or if you're separated from the group, hopefully the group will notice right away.
Yeah.
And if the group has noticed, like if you are separated from your group, that might be one of those scenarios where it is better to not be moving.
Yep. Yeah.
Use your whistle, use your whatever you've got to like alert your group that, hey, I'm separated from you. Like, come find me.
I just listened to a whole podcast about the Donner Dinner Party, or not Donner Dinner Party, but the Donner Party. There's a game we play called Donner Dinner Party. But yeah, like is it better to get lost in groups? Well,
okay, fair enough. I mean, hopefully it's not to that, but then again, all the more reason to be wearing brightly colored clothing. Like when you're out on the trail, don't wear your camo when you're out there. Hopefully you have an emergency beacon of some sort. Mike and I have said before, we do not carry an emergency beacon, but the cell phones that we have do have satellite connectivity with them, so I feel like that is a good alternative for us. Another tip, if you do have a cell phone and you find yourself separated and not sure where you're at, now might be a good time to turn on low power mode on your phone. Conserve as much battery as you can just in case. Hopefully you're not lost for that long, but
if you are, that's something I just thought of too, is if you are traveling in a group and you have the same type of service, like you and I both have iPhones, other people have Androids, whatever, but we have the Find My option. We both share our location with each other. Even if you don't want them stalking you when you're back at home, share your location with your peers in the woods. That way, if you do get separated, the Find My option, it's if you have cell phone signal, you can like, okay, they're in that direction, let me head that way. So,
and I guess, I mean, if your plan is to move, right? Like if your plan is to self-rescue, I mean, that's kind of what they call it, where you're finding your way out, you're self-rescuing, right?
Right.
we've talked about like how when we plan, we don't push ourselves to our maximum miles and we leave ourselves a little bit of gap for like time wise and all that sort of stuff. If you find yourself off trail and not sure where you're at and not sure where to go, I do not recommend pushing yourself to absolute exhaustion
No.
every
Yeah.
day, like trying to find yourself to get back out of the woods. Like, go a good distance. I'm not saying, like, don't put in a hard day's work, but like, do not push yourself to the absolute exhaustion point,
Right.
because
Yeah.
that's
Know
going
your
to
limits.
have all sorts of other problems that it's going to create, especially in this situation.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely know your limits. If you are setting up a base camp and you're going to try to go wander in this direction, find something, wander in that direction, know your limits there too. Like, I can go 100 yards this way before I'm going to turn around, and then I'll be able to go 100 yards in the other direction if need be. Make sure you know those limitations for yourself.
Yeah.
Don't let your ego wear you down, like break you.
Well, and then, I mean, I guess that is a good point too. Like, as far as ego goes, if you are real deal lost, right? Like, you're not just like a little bit off the trail and you don't know exactly where you're at. But like, if you are real deal lost and you have the ability to call for help,
Right.
call for help. Like, I mean, I get it. Like, it's a little bit embarrassing and people are real reluctant to do that sort of stuff because, like, oh, I'm sure I can figure it out. I'm sure if I just go up over this next hill, it'll be fine or whatever. But like,
I'll never hear the end of it if I call
I'll never
somebody
hear the
or,
end of it
yep.
if I need rescued or like, I mean, this is not the time to be proud, you know,
Right.
like,
Right. Well, we learned that the one year when we knew our limits or learned our
yes.
limits and ended up calling for help and getting out of
I
there.
mean, and that was a
So,
slightly different situation. We weren't lost. We were just exhausted. Um,
right.
which, like I mean, being exhausted is a real thing. Like, you can get
Hmm.
exhausted out there, especially if you're new and you don't know what your limits are. And, you think like,
Yeah.
oh, well, yeah, I should be able to go this far and whatever. Like, exhaustion is a real thing. And you and I had a long conversation before we decided to not continue on about
Right.
like, oh, like your wife is gonna make fun of you, my husband's gonna make fun of me, people are never
Yep.
gonna let us live it down. But like at the end of the day, it was like, okay, that is all true, and they did pick on us, and they did, rib us pretty
Yep.
good about it. But at the end of the day, I couldn't keep going. So like there was
Right.
no alternative. I mean, there was an alternative, and it wasn't going to be a good one. But like,
Right.
this is not the time to put your pride as the first thing. If you need to
Right.
call for help, call for help. The other things you can do, like if you have gotten to that point where you have had to call for help or you are relying on people to find you, we've said it 20 times already on this, but like this is the time. If you've got brightly colored clothing, this is the time to put it on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
If you've got a whistle, this is the time to be blowing on that whistle periodically. If you have the ability to make a fire, it wouldn't hurt to make a
Yep.
fire. I'm not
Yep.
saying set the whole forest on fire, but like make
Right.
a
Responsibly.
fire that you can use as like a signal fire type thing. What else? If you've got a flashlight, I don't think it would hurt to have that handy to use at night if
Yep.
you see a helicopter flying over or you see people walking by. Like use that as a signal in some way.
Yep.
Use if you one thing that Mike and I do not take, but I'm going to recommend people take a signal mirror. Like take a little pocket mirror that you can
Yeah.
use to signal people with. I don't think that's a bad thing to have. It weighs
That's not
practically nothing.
not and it doesn't require any kind of power,
Exactly.
like a flashlight or anything like that. Yep.
Yep. So I mean, take some of your, get your emergency things handy. Use
Yep.
them for what they're needed for. This is the time to have them out if you are not where you think you are supposed to be.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, yeah. Like you said, don't let your pride and don't let your. I mean, pack wisely. So don't go throwing free flashlights and like all this kind of stuff. Like, don't
Right.
overdo it on your
Right.
packing your emergency stuff, but also just be smart about it and know like I'm only going to use these things in the event of an emergency or in the event of I am lost and need help. It might be hopefully you don't need them, but at least you have them as a just in case. It'll be the time you don't take them that you end up needing them.
Well, and then I guess if I could just revisit like the whole group thing too, we kind of glossed over that with you know the Donner Party stuff because I mean that is kind of funny. But here, if you are going out hiking in a group, hopefully you all stay together. But if there is some reason that you are separating for some whatever it is, somebody wants to go off on a day hike and the rest of the group don't want to go, or whatever that situation looks like for you, have a conversation about
Yeah.
like what is the plan. Hopefully everybody in the group knows what the plan is. Like, okay, we're gonna everybody that's not doing this is gonna stay in this spot, or
Yep.
for those that are taking a different path to the next location, this is where we all plan on being by such and such time or whatever. I recommend everybody stay together. Please don't split up. But I understand people have different methods of hiking and different things like that. So I'm not going to be ignorant and pretend like this is never a possibility. But have a
we run
conversation
into
with the
solo
group.
hikers all the time too, so they don't have a group. So
That's the thing. I mean, I know people are out there solo hiking. I think I get the appeal.
Careful.
I get the appeal, right? Like,
yeah.
Part of the reason you and I go hiking in the first place is we want to get away from everything. You and I just happen to get along good enough that we can get away from everything by going together.
Right.
But if you don't have somebody in your life that is into hiking and you want to go hiking and you're a strong-minded person, I get going out there by yourself. I understand it, but you're asking for a lot more. What's a good way to put this? You're asking for, I don't want to say you're asking for it because you're not asking for it, but you're opening the possibility of having more problems.
There's more risk involved.
Because, like, okay, so going back to what we said at the beginning of this, right? When we were in the Porkies that first time, there was two of us.
Mm-hmm.
One of us could go down what we thought was a branch of the trail, and another of us could go down the other branch of the trail until we found what we thought we were, and we were able to do that because there was more than one of us.
Right.
If you're by yourself, you're only relying on yourself. You don't have somebody else to bounce ideas off of. If you and I got lost together, we're going to use the stop method, but then you and I have two heads to think, okay, what is the best course of action?
Right. Yeah. The more brain power you have, the better in that situation.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is not a time to like argue about what the better idea is. Like it's
it's not a time to pick a leader and just follow one person's ideas. It's a time to collaborate and I don't know. Vanilla Ice said it best. I think of the stop, collaborate, and listen.
Yes. Right.
So
right. But just stay alert to your surroundings. Don't get yourself worked up so much that you're walking into a more dangerous situation. Like don't be don't be in such a hurry to get back to civilization that you're throwing caution to the wind and wind up walking off the ledge of a ravine, or don't be trying to wade through a river that is like treacherously fast and full of rocks, or keep your wits about you. Be smart about the movements that you make.
Walk realistically. If you're not on a trail, don't cross the river, follow the river.
Yeah.
That type of a thing. So,
okay. But then, I mean, I say that, but then, okay, what if there's a road right across the river?
Well, okay, but that's one thing.
But now it's a super fast moving river full of rocks and you might get swept down. So, I mean, I'm just saying,
follow it in one direction or the other and see if that road crosses the river.
And this might be a good time to stop again. Like you can stop more than once and assess your situation.
Well, right.
Like
absolutely.
Okay, this is good. We've got some good signs, but don't just like blindly rush into something without thinking it through too.
Continuously stopping is also going to help you avoid the panic. Stop and just think is going to prevent the panic from setting in. If you continuously are just move, a wrong move might throw you into a panic mode. So if you think you're making a wrong move, slow it down. reassess, figure it out.
And
So,
here's another thing that I guess I'll just say just to say it. Nothing happens as fast as you want it to. Like
oh, absolutely.
you are not going to be magically unlost in 5 minutes, right?
Right.
I mean, you might
Right.
be. You might stumble
You
across the
might be.
path. You might stumble across some other people, but like nothing happens as fast as you want to, especially when you're already kind of stressed out. So plan on it taking a long time to get unlost.
For sure. I've been wanting to bring up especially with all the, if you're marking your path with ribbon, if you're having some kind of a signal fire, if you're doing any of that stuff, do your best to still follow the leave no trace options. I mean, the ribbon, eh, you're probably going to end up leaving that out there, but most of that stuff is it breaks down pretty quickly and it's not that bad. If you have the means to go grab some of them, go get it. But if not, but especially with the fire, I mean, just make sure it's out before you get rescued, anything like that, or at least it's not going to spread and catch the rest of the forest on fire and things like that.
Yeah, I hear you, and I totally don't disagree with what you're saying. Like, I mean, that is, good practice to, leave no trace, pack and pack out, all the things that we talk about on all of our episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give everybody a little bit of grace on this one. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like,
yeah, yeah.
I get
I'm saying
that
just
not
do
being
your
your top
best.
priority.
Right, right. Yeah, that might not be top of mind. Is like, oh, I got to pick that up.
Yeah, right. I mean, I will give everybody a little bit of grace if you are lost and
Right,
you're
right. But
trying to.
still try to keep that a part of your mind there.
For
Try to
sure.
keep the woods good. So,
For sure.
that's pretty much all I have, other than just like some tips on preventing getting lost. But we've already kind of covered all of my notes on preventing getting lost. Like, carry your navigation tools. Tell someone your plan, where you're planning on being. Stay on the trail if you're probably not going to get lost if you stay on the trail, but if you lose the trail, then that doesn't work.
Right.
And be aware of your time if you're losing daylight, things like that. But we kind of already touched on all of that, so I don't really feel like that's worth going into a ton.
Okay, fair enough. Well,
So,
so if anybody has any other tips or tricks that they use that they would like to share, by all means, reach out to us. You can reach us on our email, which is ShawnMikeHike@gmail.com. You can reach us on most of the major socials at Shawn Mike Hike, or directly on our website, ShawnMikeHike.com. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. And until next time, go take a hike.
go take a hike or get lost.
We'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
Maybe,
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.